Okay, let's start today by reviewing what we talked about last Thursday with regard to preparation of images for the web. The screen resolution is what for, it doesn't matter whether it's for Mac or PC, so now it's different. 72 pixels per inch. That's screen resolution. So, since we're not printing, then that means everything that we do in this class, all the images that we prepare, either in Photoshop or Fireworks or whatever program you use, will be what resolution? 72 pixels per inch. That's all we need. You don't need more, you certainly don't need less. You don't need any more. So everything in here will be done at 72 pixels per inch. That's what we're working with. In order to put these images on the web, so image file formats. Okay, there are any number of programs that we can use to create and edit images. But there are only how many different file formats that can be used for the web? And what are those? JPEG? Okay. So we can only use JPEG, GIF, and PNG. That's it. Can't use any others. Well, that's not true. When we get to Flash, those are SWF files, but I mean, they're just plain still images. They're not animated, or even if they are. No, there's one thing that I didn't mention last week. The oldest type of animated images that are available on the web can be generated as GIFs, and they do not require any plugins to use. I don't know too many people that use this anymore. You can do it in Photoshop. You can create simple animated images in Photoshop and save them as GIF files. And when you load them up in the browser, they're animated. Simple movements, simple transitions, whatever. But the file sizes are usually pretty large, and the quality of animation and the smoothness of movement is pretty herky-jerky. It doesn't work very well. So I'm really not going to, unless you absolutely want to know later on, we can cover that. But I typically don't, because instead it's easier just to use Flash. Okay. But other than that, does everybody remember the basic rules that I talked about? For example, when would you use a JPEG? Yeah, the basic photographic image. So, but any kind of image, I mean, it could be an illustration, it doesn't have to be a photograph, but something with transitions and tones, gradations, things like that. If you illustrated type, and you had the type look like chrome, or type look, it's three-dimensional looking, and it had transitions and tonality, so that it looked three-dimensional, as opposed to two-dimensional, you would probably say there's a JPEG. In what instances would you use a GIF or a PNG? Yeah, 2D graphic images. 2D and 2D flat graphic images. So there's no no change in tonality. It's flat, two-dimensional. And what would be another instance of you would use a GIF? Maybe you just decided that you had a photograph image, but you had to use to do what you wanted to do was by using a GIF. Yeah. So, or transparency. Okay. So what distinguishes now the king of the image? You can do both. What situation would arise when you would probably want to use this as opposed to one of these? Yeah, this can only be completely if it's a background or it's part of an image or whatever, it can only have 100% transparency. This is the best way to put it. So this only allows 100% transparency. You cannot have the onion skin effect where it's partially transparent. You can see the image, but you can see through the image. Right? This allows partial transparency. This file format, not too many years ago, had not been widely adopted by a number of browsers, so it was pushed off to the side. But now it is, so it is pretty safe to use. Okay, pretty much all instances. Okay, if you can remember those basic rules, that's really all you need to know. There are exceptions, and I'll go over those different, the different ways that each of these look. We're going to do that one more time. And then what we're going to do today, we're going to bring images today to scan or you're going to say to the web. I can show you how to grab or where to go to grab images off the internet. If you want, we have some books in the back in the store, and I can show the rest of you, if you want, how to use the scanner. Okay? So you can scan your own images. Oftentimes, well, how many of you, when you use a camera these days, use a digital camera? There we go. It almost puts, for your own personal purposes, it puts the need for the flatbed scanner to rest. You don't need to use it that much. Except if you're using someone else's image that's, it's been printed and you can't find it in digital form and you have to digitize it. Then we need to use the scanner. So if you can remember that for simple preparation for your images. And you do need to know, aside from pixels per inch, you do need to know the physical size that you're going to use it. And I prefer, it can be measured in inches, it can be measured in millimeters, centimeters, whatever you want. But it's easiest when you're in Photoshop to measure it in pixels, because then it translates directly to what we're doing here. 72 pixels really equals an inch. So that when you're in Photoshop and you're measuring in pixels, you know, okay, it's going to be 300 pixels wide by 100 pixels tall. You know exactly 100% what that's going to look like. Okay? Are there, based on what I talked about last week, are there any other questions that you have? Or maybe something, I'm going to run through some of these and show you the basic steps again, and show you some samples of each of these. Photographic image, 2D flat, and then both, as well as with backgrounds removed and transparency when you use those file formats. I'm not going to worry too much about, remember I talked about the matted image, the background, or the little fringe where we change the color so it would match. That's just, I know that probably confused a lot of you, but it's not that an issue at the moment. I don't want to talk too much about that. I'd rather just make sure that you understand how to save these three formats and how to use Photoshop in order to do that. Okay? Please get your notes. this in the background. And I'm going to use the infamous rubber ducky. Let me go back to the original one inside Photoshop samples file. So let's go to applications. There, Photoshop folder. We're looking at samples, and there is the document tip. So when someone gives you an image, scan an image, what are some of the things that you need to look at first and think about before you save the web? You should probably look at the file format. And right now I can tell right off the bat that this is a TIFF image. That works well for print. That does not work well for the web. So I probably should save this as a Photoshop image, because didn't I say the other day that too, that when you're working with files, that really Photoshop should be, the Photoshop extension should be the format you use for your original file. That's not the one that you put up on the web, but that is anytime you make revisions to an image, any kind of changes at all, that you go back not to your GIF or your PNG or your JPEG, but you go back to your original Photoshop document, make the changes, and then save the web again. Is that clear to everybody? Okay. So the first thing that I should do is I should probably go to image size, so I can see what resolution is. It is, I don't need to change this. If this were 300 pixels per inch, I would have to throw away pixels and reduce this to 72. Make sure when you do that that you do not have resample image turned off, because when I change this 300, notice that it reduces the size of the image to about 1.5 by 2 inches. But if we're starting with a 72 pixel per inch image, we're almost set to go. The next thing that you should look at is the size in pixels, 500 by 546 pixels. And when I look at the image on my screen, I can see that it's at 100%. This is the size that it would show, that it would be viewed on my browser. Now, if this is the size you want, then leave it alone. But that would be, for web images, a large image. Does anybody remember the average web page size that I said we would be probably designing? About 800 pixels wide by 600 pixels deep. So really 800 pixels wide is about the maximum width. And if the width of this image is 500 pixels, that's almost the width of an entire page. So that would be considered, that's fairly big. So when you're designing, you have to have an idea ahead of time about how big. And you can use rulers in Photoshop. If you're not aware of it, one of the things that we can do in Photoshop is go under View and select Rulers, or we can hit Command R to bring up rulers, and it shows, depending on your settings and preferences, right now this is set to inches. If I want, and for print I would probably prefer it in inches, but what I can do in Photoshop preferences is go to Units and Rulers and switch the units from inches to pixels. And now it shows me this is 500 pixels wide. And I can look at the depth, and it's a little over 500, almost 550 pixels deep. So I know 100% this is exactly the size it's going to be viewed on the web. Now I can go back to image size, and I can change this. I don't need to change the resolution. Let's reduce this just for the heck of it, maybe 300 pixels. And I would keep the width and the height linked to one another. If you don't do that, then when you change one and then you change the other, you'll get a squash or stretch effect with the image. Unless that's the effect that you're going for, it will not, the ratio between width and height should be maintained. So this is the size now that I'm going to use for web. Before I go any further, before I save for web, I should first go to File, Save As, not Save, but Save As, and Save as a Photoshop file. And you'll notice it automatically changes the extension to .psd, which stands for Photoshop Document. Okay. One more important thing, another technical thing that we unfortunately do have to deal with. Remember I said it's better to start now than later. And when you start to name your files, what were the rules that I gave you for naming files?
Start with the lowercase.
Start with the lowercase. What did I say about spaces between words, and what did I say about special characters? Yeah, no spaces between words, or if you do have a space, use an underscore. No special characters, so no ampersands, no question marks, no exclamation marks, no quotes, no whatever. And the other one is never start the name with a numeral. So don't start with 2. Something like that. It can end in 2. Don't start with 2. So by saving my Photoshop document in the proper format or the naming the structure, anytime I save for web after that, it will automatically be correct. I don't need to worry. It will automatically change the extension for me. And each of the files will reside next to one another in the same folder, so I don't need to work with just okay. So I'm going to save mine on the desktop. You're not. You're going to save yours in your flash drive. So this is my original. If I choose to add layers, if I choose to add type, if I choose to make any kind of, add any effects to this, or filters, or whatever, I can do that. And all of these changes can be saved and modified as an original Photoshop document. But as soon as I save it as a TIFF, as soon as I save it as a JPEG or a GIF, or PNG, or whatever other file format, most of them that are used for print or for the web, it flattens them. So all of those layers, all of those effects that were editable before are no longer editable. That's why emphasizing that your original is always a Photoshop document, so you can go back to it and revise it. What is one of the other problems if you open up a JPEG, make changes to it, and then save it as a JPEG again?
It compresses it.
It compresses, decompresses, and if you do that enough times, because JPEG file formats are a lossy file format, it throws away pixels in order to compress it. And eventually, there's a degradation in quality. One that won't be apparent at first, but later on, you might compare the two images side by side. It's one of those chance things. You'll say, "Ooh, this doesn't look so good anymore," and that's why. So I've checked the resolution, I've checked the size, I've checked the file format. I think I'm set to go. Now I'm ready to save for web.
Do you need to make sure it's an RGB first?
I'm sorry.
First, you need to make sure it's RGB first.
Yes, thank you. I want to go image mode and make sure it's RGB. Because this could have been saved for print, and the mode would have been CMYK, and that won't work for web either, because your monitors are RGB, red, green, blue, or the primary colors. And also, in most cases, one other thing to add complexity, just 8 bits per channel is fine. When you get up to the 16 and 32, it probably won't work. So 8 bits per channel. In most cases, you will not have to check for that, the bit depth, but you will have to change from time to time. Check from time to time the color mode. And it does tell you right here in the parentheses that this is an RGB/8-bit. black, so you can tell right off the bat value.
What is the bit?
Bit depths have to do with the number of possible colors per pixel. And a bit is 2 to, or actually is 2, and a byte is 2 to the power of 2, or 2 to the power of 2, whatever. So if I have an 8-bit image, then it's 2 to the power of 8, and that's 256. So I have for each pixel a possibility of 256 colors for that one pixel. And when you get into 16 bits, then that's thousands of pixel or color possibilities. 32 gets into millions, and it also, actually 24 gets into millions, and 32 then gets into alpha, which is transparency and other things. So most of those are reserved for other things. You can put stuff on the line or on your monitor, but not for saving it for the web. So now that I'm ready to save this for the web, and I just want to save it as a plain old image.
Excuse me, what size did you pick for the pixels?
It's not important. I made the image smaller than what it was, 300 by 328 pixels. It could be 400. I could have left it the same size. It's really not important. The point is I wanted to change it a little bit so it was more compatible. And we looked at some web pages the other day. Most of those images that we saw on web pages were pretty small. But there are instances where you may want one large image. It's not often. Small images load much quicker than one big image, and that's why when you see the slice tool and stuff, that it's better to slice images out, which will, you don't want to go there. So now that I'm ready to save this to the web, what do I do?
Do you go to File, Save for Web?
Correct. File, Save for Web and Devices. And it really brings up an ancillary program. At the top, there are 4 tabs. We can look at the original. We can look at the optimized. We can look at 2-up or 4-up. And remember, I said, it's just my personal preference. I like to look at 4-up. So I can compare and contrast. The next thing that I need to know is if I'm designing for a particular audience, I need to consider the baud rate, the lowest common denominator, their modem is set to. And by default, when you open the program, it's usually set for a 28K modem, which is very slow. You've got an old dial-up modem, but today, if you want, you can click here, and I set it to 56.6 kilobytes per second. And that is still a pretty good average. Most people in the world, I guess, still have, on average, 56.6K dial-up modem. But remember, I said if you're only designing for someone who has a T1 connection, don't have to worry about the slow connections and set it otherwise. But remember, when you do that, the higher the baud rate, you're eliminating all those other people at the bottom. It will take forever for those images to download to their computer. Does that make sense? Okay. So this tells me to my left, here's my original image. It's the ducky.psd image, and it's 288K. That is a very small font, but it's not small enough for the web. If I look to the right, depending on the last settings that you use, this one is set to JPEG, high quality, progressive. And you'll notice that now we've reduced it, we've compressed it even further, and it's 14.16K, and the download time for a 56K modem is 3 seconds. That's more than doable. That's very good. But if you're wondering, well, what if I were to use a GIF? What if I were to use a camera? Then you can come down to these other check boxes and you can switch. We can go from here to GIF over here. And let's use perceptual color. No transparency, just white background. In the lower right-hand corner, I'll click on it, and I'll switch from JPEG to PNG 8-bit. Ooh, PNG 8-bit doesn't look too good. It starts to posterize, doesn't it? Really, we have a limited number of colors. Even if I use diffusion, or I use pattern, or I use noise for the dithering, actually noise looks the best, but it still looks pretty grainy compared to the others. So let's leave that. Say that's the best, you know, maybe I can live with that quality image. But then I look and I see, okay, this GIF takes 7 seconds. That's 4 seconds more than the JPEG, so that's not a direction I'm going to go. I look at the PNG 8-bit, and that's 5 seconds. That's still 2 more seconds. And it's, on top of that, it's a lower quality image. So you're constantly comparing and contrasting. That's what the bottom line will determine what you do. Now when we get to transparency, that's different because you know that your download time will be increased by the other file formats that you choose, but it's a trade-off. If you absolutely have to have transparency, then maybe that's what you'll choose. You know, but if it gets too great, as I said, for your opening page, your index page, your home page, whatever you want to call it, it really shouldn't take any longer than maybe 10 seconds to download total. So it doesn't take many images, does it, to add up to 10 seconds. Text will download very quickly, you know, just a couple of seconds. So with one image on there, I'm already 3 plus some text, could be 5 seconds. I have 1 or 2 more images to my home page, and before you know it, you're up to 10 seconds. So this tool is extremely useful in allowing you to compare, make those comparisons. Before this was available, it was a kind of a hit or miss proposition. You had to save it, you know, go through each of these steps and save it, and then you would compare when you were done. You would open all the files, you'd look at the file size, you'd look at the quality, and it would take a long time to do. This can be done without actually saving anything.
Didn't you say for a photo or that you would always use the JPEG though? Did you say for a photographic image you'd always use a JPEG format?
Not always, but in 99% of the cases you will. I will, in a moment, show you one of those exceptions, one way, and that's when we use transparency. So my vote is that we go with the JPEG. It's only 3 seconds. We can use high quality. I wouldn't go any higher than high for the web. That looks pretty good. Again, how can you tell? Is you just switch. And at some point, you're going to see a difference. Sometimes you won't. Maybe low quality will be adequate. Depends on, I guess, how good your eyesight is. And also, when you look too, you'll notice that even when I go lower, a high quality adds 1 second, and that's all. So I'd rather go with the high quality rather than go with a medium or low quality and only gain 1 second. Just, you know, personal choice. So I'll go ahead and click Save. Make sure that in this particular instance I saved images only. And notice that when I save it, it automatically adds the proper extension. And because I've used the correct formatting in naming my image, I don't have to worry now. It's already set, ducky.jpg. It's ready to be used in Dreamweaver and uploaded, and it will read on the browser just fine. No problems. But if I forget, even though I've done everything else correctly, if I had a capital D here, that could result in the fact that it would not upload properly. So the naming of files is important. It's important now. It's important when we work with Flash. It's important in HTML pages, all that sort of stuff. So it's better that we start now and get in the habit of doing it. So I'll save it. Boom. So now it's saved, and they're both on my desktop. There's my Ducky Photoshop, and there's my Ducky JPEG. Okay, now there's an instance perhaps when we want just the silhouette of the duck. We do not want the white background. JPEG files come in, all files come in as rectangular images, but JPEGs have to have a background color of some sort. You cannot have transparency with JPEGs. So if I decide, let's switch to layers here, pull layers over, and all I have to do is double click on the background layer, and that turns it into a transparent layer. Now there's any number of tools that I can use. I could use the magic wand, select the background, and hit delete, and the background is removed now. I can tell the background is removed by seeing this little checkerboard. That in Photoshop indicates transparency. Now I want to save the image, and I want the background, as I've done here, eliminated. So to do so, I go back to File, Save for Web, and Devices. And notice that when it's a JPEG, the white background that I had comes back, because I said you can't have a JPEG with a transparent background. So here's my original, but if it's saved as a JPEG, it will bring that white background back. So now I'll go around the horn again and we'll try some different options. I know that GIF is an option, and that works for me. And you can go through some of these different options here, either perceptual color, selective color, see if there's a difference in download time, see if there's a difference in the quality of the image. Adaptive color. When I get the restrictive color, that will definitely look very different. But notice how few colors I'm using, and notice that it takes only 2 seconds to download. So if I'm happy with that quality of image, then go with that. It only takes 2 seconds. But I'm not. I would rather use perceptual, so it uses more colors, it takes a longer time to download. Notice that we're adding 2 seconds, or actually it was 3 seconds before, so we're adding 4 seconds to our download time, so that we can have transparency. It's still not a large file, but it's something that you need to factor in when you're designing. Maybe there's another way of working. You don't have to have transparency. We can come down to the lower left-hand corner, and again, instead of JPEG, this time we'll select ping. And I'll make sure the transparency is selected. And we'll use the pattern, maybe noise. No, I'm going to use pattern. How about the period? Nope. Pattern, this is it. That looks the best. It's a little grainier, and you probably cannot tell there, but this is a little grainier than the GIF. But notice by doing that, and this is a tough call, this is only 4 seconds, and this one is 7. So maybe slight degradation in quality is okay. It's minor. So maybe the ping would be a better choice. I don't know. You know, some of these there aren't real hard. When you get into this range, there aren't hard and fast rules. As I said, it's a juggling act. What's the quality that is acceptable to you, and also the download time. You know, so it's not hard and fast, but they are things that you do have to factor in when you're working. For me right now, probably because most people, for example, people that I would be dealing with like all of you, have cable modems or DSL. There might be 1 or 2 people that have 56K. So I guess I'm telling those people, cut. You know, you know, it's up to you. But if you're starting a business, or you know, you're designing to try to reach the broadest audience possible, you know, some of the low weighting and Hoboken, New Jersey, who just started on the web and has a 28K modem, you know, and you really want to get a couple bucks from her to buy whatever it is, the widget that you're making, then you would have to factor that in. But if you're designing, as I said, for an art director, it probably has a nice big 30-inch screen, has a T1 connection, you don't have to worry about it. It's not an issue. So that's, you know, you always have to factor in the audience. That will oftentimes be the determining factor, and then you weigh, okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll save that as transparency. Go ahead and save. Images only. Notice it automatically adds the extension GIF. Click save. Save. Let's do one more. What if I were to take this and make this partially transparent? Maybe I was going to use this as a background image, where I was going to layer this on a pattern background. I wanted to be able to see through that. I didn't want it opaque. So I have, I'll say 50% transparency. So we'll go back and we'll save again. So that's what I mean by partially transparent. The background is 100% transparent. This, you can still see part of the duck. So it's partially transparent. We'll save for web and devices again. And now we'll look at the GIF. And you'll notice, compare the duck. That's why they have the checkered background. Notice that checkered pattern goes away in this one. You can't have partial transparency with GIF. Okay, so GIF won't work for us. So let's go back in the lower left-hand corner once again, and we'll switch to Ping. And you know what? Ping 8-bit doesn't work for us either. It's only when we select the lower right-hand corner and I select Ping 24, that's where we're talking about, you're asking about bits, 8, 24, 32. Well, in 24, that allows partial transparency. But what you're sacrificing now is, look at this one, in order to do this, 20-second download. That for me would be unacceptable. I would have to think of another way around it. The only time I would use this would be probably if I were planning on importing this image into Flash. That would be a good choice to use, because once it's in Flash, it's going to recompile all of these images anyway and save it as a JPEG. And it does, when you have your Flash project already set up, then it will be a non-issue. But to use it in an HTML page, a book page, for me, that would be just too much. So I would have to think of another design solution.
Does it also have to do with the size of the image? Does it also have to do with the size of the image?
That also factors into it, sure. The bigger the image, the bigger the font. The smaller the image, smaller the font. But remember what I also said last week, too, is that if I decide when I'm in Dreamweaver that, you know what, I didn't want this image to be 300 pixels wide. I only need it to be 100 pixels. Dreamweaver will allow me to resize the image. But when I resize it, it does not change the file size. It's a nice feature to have, and I think for minor adjustments, it's good. But if it's a significant change in size, it's better to go back to Photoshop and to resave the image so that you get the maximum compression. Unfortunately, with web design, there's a lot of bean counting involved. And you're trying to optimize the look, make sure that your page looks as good as possible, and at the same time make sure that the file size and total of your page is as minimal as possible. So to allow the end user to download that page as quickly as possible. I mean, even before the web, we as a culture had begun with television developed very short attention span. And that came with television, with really quick cuts to commercials and back and forth. And it doesn't take much. And that translated later on to print. That when people sit in the doctor's office and you flip through a magazine, one that's waiting forever, you see the doctor and you're flipping through the magazines and you look at ads, or you look through articles and you see an ad. If that ad doesn't grab you within a second or two, you've lost the viewer. It's a very short time. And if you think that short, it's probably even more, that becomes even more of a factor on the web. And so if it's important to you that you have a quality image and you have large download time, for that other person it may not be so important. And if it's taking 15, 20 seconds for them to download the page, they're going to get frustrated and they're going to say, enough of this, unless they absolutely have to be on your website. I don't want to deal with this, and they moved on to somebody else, and they're not going to come back. Does that make sense? That too is why it's important. If you're the only person that's going to view it, and maybe your friends, then maybe it's not an issue. But I'm letting you know that if you're designing, and most of you will be for a broader audience, then it does become a major factor. You want the end user to have the best experience possible, so that they come back, they stay on your website for a long period of time, and that they have a good experience and that they come back. But if you thwart their experience with long download times and crummy looking images and bad, kind of jaggy images and poor quality and stuff, it's not going to be something that they want to deal with. There's just too much competition. So those are fundamentally basic instances where you could take the same image and it could be conceivably a different product. Any questions? Somebody missed it. Does everybody know how to get images off the internet? Okay. So there are a couple of places you can go. If we were in my Photoshop class, I would say don't go to Google, because they're not, the images aren't quality images. You can't use them to print. Okay. So I'm going to create a new window here, and I'm just going to go to Google. And go to images, and let's do a search for some masks. Maybe I want a picture of a mask. Halloween is not that far away, and maybe I want to get a picture of a domino mask, or maybe a Mardi Gras type mask for my website. So if I click on it, and then I look at the image in full size, that's as large as the image you can get. To download this from here onto your computer, it can be one of two ways. If you have a 3-button mouse, you can right-click. It brings up a little menu, and I can save image to downloads, or I can save image as, or I can add this image to iPhoto. There's any number of ways of doing it. So I'll just say save image as. And it's named Christina Mask, but I'm going to go back to lowercase. And I'm going to use an underscore instead of a hyphen. And I'll, again, save it on my desktop. You would save it in your image folder. And now it's saved. Now we can open up Photoshop and we can do with it what we want. Remember, however, that there is copyright infringement when you do this. For our purposes in class, no copyright infringement. As soon as you publish it on the web, you've infringed on someone's copyright, even though you're a student. I think it would be hard pressed to convince a judge that it's fair use. In class, it's one thing when it's published for everyone to see. Even though it's a student project, I don't know, I don't trust the courts right now that they would agree with this, it's fair use. There is another very good website you can go to, and that's Flickr. FLICKR.com. Okay. And this is where you can share your images with others. And you can register your images using something called a Creative Commons license. And that means that not necessarily all rights are reserved, but some. And there's some pretty nifty images in here. Now, I already have an account. I can't remember. I hope I remember what it is. Can we get out? I don't have a Yahoo ID. Unless they've changed this. Let me just do a search. And let's look up masks again and see what we come up with. That's a cool one. And what I'm going to do here is click on this image. And I want to look and see. Should be fairly apparent, and it's not. I might be missing something. But usually, if these are registered with the Creative Commons, it will say that it is, and that you can download this. I'm going to come to Flickr in a different way. I'm going to go to Creative Commons first. And what I want to do is I want to search CC licensed work. And I'm going to use Flickr for some other resources as well. Let's go back again. Let's do enter circuitry, enter masks. Cool. So let's click on this one. And let's see what is said here. Let's look at all sizes. See the little, this is what is unique about Flickr as opposed to grabbing an image off of Google, is that oftentimes you'll see that there are a variety of sizes that have been posted here. So if I click here, you will see that there are a variety of sizes, all the way up to the original, which is 1,000 by 1,500 pixels. That's a pretty good size image. And this actually would be suitable for print. A small print image, but a print one just the same. So notice that we have a variety of sizes at our disposal. You can come down here and you'll see that this is registered under the Creative Commons license. And you're going to have to look to see what all of these symbols represent, but it typically means that you want this person, if you do use it, they just want you to give them credit. That it's for non-commercial purposes. That if you use it for commercial purposes, then you need to contact that person and you need to compensate them in some way. And this also means here that they do not allow any derivative works, meaning you cannot take this image and manipulate it and create something else with it. But there are a number of images in here where they do allow derivative works. And the only contingency is that if you derive something from theirs, that you allow someone else to derive something from yours. And that's something that I prefer to do with my own. Now I would consider an honor if somebody took my work and was inspired by it and built something else based on it. I think that would be pretty cool. But some people are very protective of their images. It is mine. It is my creative piece, and I don't want anybody touching it. And you can share a little bit, but that's it. Some people don't want to share at all. You pay me for the right to use it, and that's it. Even to look at it. I want cash for someone. But Flickr and maybe going to Creative Commons would be the best choice, so that you see all the works that are licensed with the Creative Commons agreement. And then you can download these. You just click, if I just want the large image, you can download the large image and it will come down to your computer and you can use it. It's pretty cool. And there are some amazing images. Remember that the other day when we watched, the first day in class we watched this video, all the images that they used of Notre Dame came from Flickr. Now,
If you don't have three things on your mouse to save it with, to right click it, how do you file? Do you go to file?
I'm sorry, no, if you don't have a right click, do a control click on the Mac. And I think it's the same for the PC. If you don't have, on most PCs you have a 3-button mouse, and on the Mac you won't necessarily.
So, like,
Control click on the image.
oh,
Well,
let's see.
but also you're in Flickr, so all you have to do is click on see all sizes.
Okay.
Go ahead and click on it. There we go. Now they're coming out. Now you can click and you can download this. It will automatically download
Okay,
it.
but if not, I go like that and save it in jazz.
Right.
And then the only thing I'm confused here, when we're saving an image here, is it, do we save it as a JPEG? Or as a photo?
Just use it at when, okay, good
Just-
question, good question. When you're downloading an image from the internet, first save it in whatever file format it's in. Then you open the image, and just as I did with the rubber ducky, it was a TIFF file I saved as a separate file, as a Photoshop file. And then I determined, when I saved for web, what file format I was going to use, what it went through. And by doing it that way, I still have the original file. I have a Photoshop file, which is my original file now, and I also have a file that is saved for the web. I can go back to any one of those. If you automatically take that image and download it from the internet and save it as a JPEG, I think you're limiting yourself. Because
Okay,
remember,
so
you
like
can't
this one
JPEG.
says it's a JPEG.
If it's already a JPEG, it's already one. I would still, before I did anything to it, I would save it as a Photoshop file.
Okay,
And then I would size it to the size that I need, and then save for web. Because you really shouldn't be saving a JPEG as a JPEG. Remember that, because what it does is it
Because it
compresses,
changes it.
decompresses, and that before you know it, you're going to have problems. There will be a degradation of quality. Because in order to get that compression, it has to throw away pixels. And I really don't understand the programming behind it, for that, the logarithms that they use to do that. It's, I guess in some respects, not important. Completely honest, I just have to know how to use it. Okay? So, what I need all of you to do today is to either grab an image from the internet, resize it, maybe if you want to eliminate the background or do something to it, you feel like tinkering with it in Photoshop. Save it on your flash drive as a Photoshop file, and then you want to save it for web and devices, and then email me that save for web image. Attach it. Does anybody not know how to attach a file to their email? Generally a little button somewhere, whether you're on AOL or Gmail or something, where you click it and you can attach the file. And make sure all of the files that you're using are saved on your flash drive, because they may not be here when you get back, if you saved it on the hard drive here at school. If you brought your own image, then open that up in Photoshop, which is probably most is yeah.
The rubber ducky images that we worked on, can you save those to our?
You can. You don't have to at the moment. But it's more important that you, whatever images that you're going to download today for the first assignment, that you save those on your flash drive. The other is it depends on whether or not you want to keep that, the rubber ducky, for reference to help remind yourself that this is how you do. Yes.
Did you want the original file too when we emailed
No,
it?
I just want the saved file.
Okay.
The saved file, and you will keep the original. Yes.
For an Illustrator file that can't be just saved as a Photoshop file, you create a new Photoshop file first, import it in.
You can open, let's do that. That would be another choice if you have an Illustrator file that you want to save for web. You can in Illustrator save for web, but what I would probably prefer that you do is take the file and open it in Photoshop, and you can open it directly in Photoshop, and it will convert it to a bitmap image. To do that, if I go to File, Open, and I'm going to open a file in, let's see, that's here in Illustrator. I'm going to go to Applications, you go to Illustrator CS3, I'm going to look in Cool Extras, and I'm going to look in Sample Files, and here's Sample Art. Let's open this one. It's titled Bedlam. This is an AI file. This is an Adobe Illustrator file. If I click Open, and I'm opening this in Photoshop, it gives me a dialog box, and it asks me what size I want to resize this to and what resolution do I want. If I'm going to use this image for print, I will leave it at 300 pixels per inch. Because I'm only going to use this image for the web, it only needs to be 72. The width and the height of the image are a little over 8 inches by 8 inches. I can switch to pixels, and it's a 600 by 646 pixel image. If I only need it to be 300 pixels, I can resize it right now. And now I can click OK. I can open it in Photoshop, and there we go. This is now prepared for the web, in the sense that it's no longer a vector graphic. And now I would have to save for web and make it for web. Is there anyone who wants to stand today? No? Okay. Then I won't take up that computer and do that. If you have a phone that you would like to download an image, or if you have an image that you have on a camera you would like to download, then we can do that. Or upload to the computer and use that as your image. It's up to you. Okay. To get the specifics on this particular assignment, go to my website, click on Kurt's Classes, click on Handouts, click on Part 196 Assignments. It will be the first assignment, Optimizing Images for the Web. And it's a pretty short description of what I would want you to do. Okie doke.